Well, the playoffs are here, and if 2025 has taught us anything, tight ends are the definition of boom or bust. And if you pick right, you advance. If you pick wrong, well, we're not going to talk about that. Here's your Week 15 tight end rankings. What's up, Headliner Nation? My name is Brad, the Rankings King. And before we dive into this week's rankings, just a reminder that these are the consensus rankings from the Headliners team. And for more detailed analysis, check out the start-sit videos from Kyle already posted this week. And if you want even more breakdowns each week, join the Fantasy Headliners community by hitting that join button below. That's going to get you access to extra rankings like flex, kicker, defense, and a spot inside of our Discord. Now, before we jump into our Week 15 rankings, let's look at a couple of our hits and misses from Week 14. And we'll start with Dalton Kincaid. And at the time of the rankings last week, we didn't even know if he was going to play or not. But the matchup against Cincinnati, it was too tasty, too good to ignore. We ranked him as the tight end 5, and he finished as the tight end 6. At number 2, we've got Kyle Pitts, and it's not very often that tight ends get 10 targets in a game, and if they do, they're more than likely going to be a top 10 option, and that was Pitts in Week 14. We had him at tight end 9, and he finished at tight end 7. And then next up is Isaiah Likely, and over the last couple of weeks, Likely seems to be the pass catcher that Lamar is the most comfortable with. He continues to look for him down the field, and we put him inside of the top 12 because of that, and he ended up finishing tight end 10 on the week. All right, but what about our misses? And we start with Colson Loveland, and all it took was a touchdown to push Loveland up inside the top 10. Unfortunately, we had him just outside the top 15. Our next miss was TJ Hawkinson, and it's just hard to trust Justin Jefferson with the QB play in Minnesota, which means it's been even harder to trust Hawkinson. A good game by McCarthy, though, boosted Hawk up to tight end 13, where we had him outside of the top 20. And then what about Travis Kelce? And with a tough matchup for the wide receivers in Kansas City, we were hoping Kelce would see more than dump offs to help move the chains. Well, he saw some of them, but he dropped them, and because of it, he finished a lot lower than where we had him ranked. All right, so that's it for last week. Let's move on to the future in Week 15, and we'll start with Tier 1, and we've got our 3, Trey McBride, George Kittle, and Brock Bowers. At number 1, we've got Trey McBride, and McBride is coming off a game in which he scored single digits for the first time since Week 5. He's still the tight end 1 overall, has 54 points more than the tight end 2, but unfortunately has a tough matchup this week on the road in Houston. At number 2, we've got George Kittle, and Kittle is coming off the bye, and for the season, he has the 4th highest average points per game among all tight ends. This week, he gets the Titans, who allow just over 10 points per game to the tight end position. And then at number 3, we have Brock Bowers, and Geno Smith has an injured shoulder, and Philadelphia allows the 3rd fewest fantasy points per game to tight ends, but Bowers has 10-plus fantasy points in 3 of his last 4, but he has a lot going against him in Week 15. All right, so there's your 3-headed monster in Tier 1, and before we head into the next tier, I want to make sure that you're all set up on Underdog. You already know that we're crushing those player pick'ems on Underdog this year, so what are you waiting for? Head over to Underdog Fantasy or download the app and create a new account using the referral code Headliners when you do so. Then just make your initial deposit and come join a contest. And if you sign up with that promo code, again, it's Headliners, you'll get access to all of the promos that Underdog offers weekly. And check this out, when you play your first $5, they're going to give you $75 in bonus funds. So you play 5, you get 75. It's that easy. And don't forget, Jake is also going to be breaking down the best picks weekly in a show on Fridays. Links to join are in the description, and we look forward to playing with you this week. All right, let's turn the page to Tier 2, and we've got Tyler Warren, Dalton Kincaid, Kyle Pitts, Isaiah Likely, Harold Fannin Jr., Brenton Strange, and Mark Andrews. At number 4, we have Tyler Warren, and there is an obvious concern here if 44-year-old Phillip Rivers is the QB for Indy this week, and I want you to hear this. This is very important factoid. He legit has kids older than Tyler Warren. Yeah, that's right. And Seattle does give up the 4th most points to tight ends, but the quarterback play here is absolutely terrifying. At number 5, we've got Dalton Kincaid, and it's great to see Kincaid return in Week 14, and now he'll get another matchup against the Patriots, who he had 6 catches and 108 yards against back in Week 5. The fingers are crossed here that the weather isn't too bad. At number 6, we have Kyle Pitts, and Pitts is currently questionable to play, but he has scored 11-plus fantasy points in back-to-back games games, and he's up to tight end 12 on the year. He last faced Tampa back in week 1, and he finished with 7 for 59. At number 7, we have Isaiah Likely, and if the matchup was great for Andrews, it's great for Likely as well. Likely is actually safer than Andrews due to the volume that he sees down the field. He will have a great chance against Cincinnati, who allows over 20 fantasy points to tight ends. At number 8, we've got Harold Fannin Jr., and we could be in line for a great week from Fannin because David Njoku is questionable to play. Shedeur looked great in week 14, and the Bears allow 11 fantasy points per game to the tight end position. The one caveat, it could be below 0, as in negative 20 wind chill in this game, though. And brr, that's cold. All right, at number 9, we've got Brenton Strange, and after great games in week 12 and 13, Strange couldn't get going in week 14. He did see 6 targets, but could only bring in 3 of them. And if you can see 6+ targets against an average Jets defense, his numbers should be better in week 15. At number 10, we have Mark Andrews, and this week Andrews benefits from the best matchup that you could have as a tight end against Cincinnati, but he only has 67 yards over his last 3 games combined. You have to think that he has a chance at a touchdown this week, if anything, though. All right, that's it for Tier 2. Now let's turn the page to Tier 3. We've got Travis Swift-Kelce, Jake Ferguson, Juwan Johnson, Dalton Schultz, and Theo Johnson. At number 11, we have Travis Swift-Kelce and 1 catch for 8 yards and 2 drops. An absolutely horrible game for Kelce against a tough Houston defense last week. Unfortunately, we're not confident that he can shake it off this week because this week's not going to be much easier against the Chargers, who are a top 8 defense against tight ends. At number 12, we have Jake Ferguson, and the biggest question is the status of CeeDee Lamb. Lamb is in concussion protocol but has time to clear. If Lamb is not activated, Ferguson could once again be a top 10 option against a Vikings defense that allows 10.5 fantasy points per game to tight ends. At number 13, we have Juwan Johnson, and Juwan continues to be one of the top pass-catching options in New Orleans and now gets a rematch against Carolina, who earlier in the year he had 92 yards and a touchdown against, and that was his best game of the season. At 14, we have Dalton Schultz, and over the last 3 weeks, Schultz has faced 2 top 6 defenses against tight ends. Now he has a matchup against Arizona, who allows the 8th most points to the tight end position, and he remains the top check down option for CJ Stroud. And rounding out the top 15, we've got Theo Johnson, and Theo is coming off of the bye, and he's seen 5+ targets in 4 of his last 5 games. Now he gets one of the best matchups possible against Washington, who allows the 2nd most fantasy points per game to tight ends. So there's your top 15 in tiers 1, 2, and 3. We've got a couple of guys on the outside looking in with Hunter Henry, Colson Loveland, Darren Waller, Aronde Gadsden, Dallas Goedert, and AJ Barner. And that's your week 15 tight end breakdown. Set your lineups, drop your questions below, and let's keep marching towards that championship, Headliner Nation.
Analytics off the chain, all the channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game.